Hey, it's December 28th and it's Tinderbox Meetup with Michael Becker. I'm Mark Bernstein, the designer of Tinderbox, and it's been an interesting week of debugging at Tinderbox headquarters this week, but a rewarding one. So we've fixed a bunch of things that have been plaguing us for ages and which we won't have to drag into the new year. So looking forward to that.
Can
And
you give some highlights of what that is, Mark?
Uh, mostly these are little crashes that don't happen very often, but not happening at all is much better than not happening very often. And so they won't. Hooray.
Nice.
Uh, and I also think I have a route to cleaning up animations in the maps, which gives us various hints when maps end up in the wrong place. So that'll be fun too. Uh, Without further delay, here is Michael Becker.
All right, hey everybody. Welcome to I think this is our last meetup for 2025. Wow. All right. I hope everyone had a nice holiday break and is getting prepared for New Year's. Typically what we do in these meetups, we go around the room and new people introduce themselves. We don't have anyone new today. We will jump into a theme, which have a sort of pseudo theme today. We'll see how that goes. And then we talk about people's questions, ideas, and what the work that they're doing. The theme that I thought I'd play with today is I have a exercise that I needed to do to start inventorying some of the things in my house. And so I built an automation to help me do that. And I wanted to share with people those steps. And I thought that could be fun and interesting to talk through. And then I also had some questions for you, Mark, that I wanted to run by. So maybe we can start with some. And then but before I start with my questions, anybody else on the call have any projects they're working on, thoughts, ideas, things that they want to be discussing? Roger, David, what do you guys got in your mind?
Gee, Michael, I have a 54-page spreadsheet of the inventory I had to do.
Yeah.
Uh, I won't depress you by sharing it with you.
I'd love to see it. Maybe I can get some tips. I'll joke about it. Some things that I learned in this
It's one of
process.
the most painful things ever done when you inventory. How long have you been in your house?
31 years.
Oh, God. Yeah. So words fail me. I can't use words in public like that.
Yeah.
My house, the house I was cleaning out was, I think, a family house with 80 years of accumulated. If someone else put it down, it's verboten to move it.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Okay.
And I'm still working on using Claude to assess vulnerabilities in the code base.
Okay. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, yeah, I can. So the company I work for, a company called Schweitzer Engineering Laboratories, we make, or they make, I don't, they make control equipment for the power grid. If you've got electricity flow in your house, odds are in the United States that it's being controlled by one of Schweitzer's products. Schweitzer also has other software products, which is the side the house I work on. And we, so there's a policy that we're not going to, if somebody reports a vulnerability, CVE comes in, we're going to assess it within so many weeks, days, and have a solution out within 90 days, depending on the severity of what it is. And I should have said the name of the company here, but as it turns out, but we have a code base that has or had, well, it still has 346 CVEs logged against it. We have an internal tracking system that takes a feed from the National Vulnerability Database, and it periodically scans the SBOMs that were created by the build system for the product and looking for matches. And so 346, they get sent out through a JIRA issue to the developer or a particular point of contact, and that person just ignored them. And it was okay with his boss and his boss's boss. They just ignored him. I moved into that group recently, and given that I have a cybersecurity background, I became the poor bastard responsible for dealing with those. And being a lazy developer, I had to take a look at Claude or anything, but Claude in particular is what worked out for me. To turn it loose for a given CVE, go look at the code base and determine if there's a reason to believe it's vulnerable, or if not, if cite evidence why it's not. In fact, cite evidence if it is as well. And spent a few weeks perfecting the prompt for that. It's a two-stage prompt, and by that I mean there's a request prompt that you use to launch it all, and there's a context prompt. The context prompt takes a given CVE and it goes against the code base, analyzes that, produces a report, and so on. And out of 346 of those things, 7 were determined to be vulnerable. The others were false positives, and they were false positives because of the way that software products or firmware products, even hardware products, are named formally by the guys over at NIST. It's something called NMITRE, something called CPE, Common Platform Enumeration. And there's a string in there that's the quote official name of the product. All right. Problem is that doesn't get set by the software developer or the vendor. It gets set by sometimes it gets set by the vendor. Sometimes, more often than not, it's determined by somebody else that reports a vulnerability. Or say even sometimes NIST creates one when there's not one reported. Those don't match very well to what we think the name of it is. And so we have to use generalized names, and hence we get 339 false positives. And anyway, that's taken a few months to get through all that.
Sounds painful.
Oh, painful is not the right word. It's beyond painful. There's a lot of stupidity here. And the reason these things were ignored, the system, the internal system that SEL has for tracking release code and vulnerabilities and so on, it's stupid in how it does name matching. And so there's a very high false positive rate. So people just started ignoring it. But then we have customers who are getting SBOMs and saying, hey, what gives? This thing says you have this CVE against you or whatever. And we have to justify it. Anyway, it's painful.
All right. Good luck. Hopefully you're not going to carry too much of that into the new year. Any best practices on how to make this less painful?
Well, the problem ultimately goes back to the National Vulnerability Database, how information is reported, how informal the information is that's reported. Distilling any useful information out of that is difficult at best. And this has been this way in this industry since, at least late 1990s when I got into cybersecurity.
I'm sorry.
And the problem is that things are just ad hoc in their descriptions, and they're not very useful. The guys at NIST are aware of this. There are committees that have been formed. I'm on a couple of them for solving this problem, but it's a slow process. And right now, there are roughly 350,000, give or take, CVEs. And the recent report somebody came up with was that there's 113 of those things being reported, every week. And
a CVE is, you're using jargon.
Common Vulnerability Enumeration.
Okay.
These names were created by a federally funded research and development corporation, FFRDC, called MITRE. And those guys like to use that something enumeration a lot. And it's a list is what it means.
And we're just growing these all the time.
At a faster rate than we can consume them.
Okay.
Like assuming you analyze and figure out what's wrong and so on. And again, because of how they're described, it's what you're really interested in vulnerabilities. It's not just a single vulnerability. Oh, you got this, go fix that piece of code or whatever, or change this configuration option. You're interested in the ones where through a sequence of vulnerabilities that are exploited, with each exploit resulting in greater permissions or the ability to do more things, you're interested in the change those things that will eventually lead to the compromise you don't want to happen. And ideally, if the CVE descriptions were formalized, we would be able to determine those chains through automation. This is research I worked on back in 1998, 99. And the data back then, it was this collected, made it impossible. You would have to sit down and manually analyze it yourself, figure it out, express it formally. Well, fast forward to today, where we have roughly 350,000 vulnerabilities, that isn't going to happen.
Well, and this brings us back to David Eddy's favorite concept is like, what do you mean by standardize vulnerabilities? You're suggesting standardizing a naming infrastructure.
Well, it's not even not only a naming infrastructure, but it's also classification and formal expression of relationships. And basically this comes down to something that you could put in a database and you could search.
Right, but I guess the point I was trying to get to though is it's hard to keep and maintain that level of standardization for yourself, let alone everyone on the planet.
Yes, it is. You're absolutely right. That's why it's in such a mess, because just what you said. And the hope is that, well, gee, we as an industry or NIST can turn those vulnerabilities and run them through some large language model, other AI tool, and fix this problem. In other words, take the very informally expressed stuff and create something that is formal that can then be analyzed automatically through automation.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Some of it will work because it will be the quality of the stuff will be very high and relatively easy to do that. And then there's the big bulk of it that's just crap. Some of these things are really nothing that amount to basically something's wrong here over this area. We think, go figure it out. So,
yeah, but again, I think you're nailing the kind of the root of everything that we're trying to accomplish when it comes to personal knowledge management and tools for thought and being able to get work done and express ourselves is because is navigating this problem that you're talking about.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is part of my fascination with trying to talk with Tinderbox and the audience it attracts, and going upstream to how do I change? I mean, is there anybody here, Mark? Is there anybody in your database, Mark, under 40, under 50?
Oh, yeah.
And boy, that would get, I'd love to. How do you get them started? I think that was an earlier post. How do you get the kids, 18 to 25 years old, starting off? How do you get them in the habit of taking notes and continually upgrading the quality of the notes they're taking so that they can be fed into something like Tinderbox or the CVE database? Non-trivial problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Bribe the bastards. I'm sorry, but if you figure that one out,
it's and you're spot on, Roger. I assume we both know the same guy at MITRE, who was the keeper of it doing Y2K, and that's where I came across this stuff. And the language, because words mean different things to different people.
Yeah, and back in the late '90s, this stuff with CVE didn't exist at this point in time, but we had Bug Track, Security Focus, which were essentially semi-public repositories where people would report vulnerability information. But they were just ad hoc.
Right. You got 15 minutes of spare time. Fill this thing out.
Yeah, exactly.
So
it's like taking a survey.
That's a great excuse to call MITRE. my contact, and I have not heard Michael, you did not pick up on the word SBOM.
Oh, yeah.
And what was that?
Software bill of materials.
Software bill of materials.
Okay.
If if you're mechanically inclined, you get early, you get accustomed to having plans, a schematic on this wire fits, this tab A and the tab B, slot B, and that graduates to plans for making models, et cetera, et cetera. So having a bill of materials is a specialized database to tell you how this is related to that.
Okay.
And you're not just looking for I'm interested how A is related to E. Because something.
And the properties of A and E.
Yeah. And of course, A and E in an organization aren't allowed to talk to each other for either legal reasons or internal political reasons. And so if you say, well, and we'll drag Dave Rogers in here with the jargon of the military. If the Navy says one thing, the Army is going to say something else. That's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah, I once participated. I consulted to the Defense Logistics Agency, and they had a mandate. This is back in the early '90s to unify all the logistical systems across all the services, and which was an insane and stupid idea. It wouldn't work. And anyway, they sent us out with a bunch of representatives from the various services to do a dog, it wasn't quite a dog and pony show, but to go out and analyze each of these various components in the systems, and then figure out which are the best of breed that we all should combine. They should be combined into one system, and everybody would use it. It was
right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and this stuff is absolutely beyond the reach of AI.
Yeah,
because you're basically what is the statistic of A is related to B and B is related to A? Is that a statistic of 1 or 2? I mean, because basically that's all. I mean, Mark Bernstein, you can confirm that basically you have a program that calls another piece of code. That's an A to B. And it's not in your, well, you've got this memorized, but mostly when the junior programmers are debugging this, they have no control. Are they starting with A, the program, or are they starting with B, the table? They have, research is a random walk. So anyway, great problem, Roger. I will. Great reminder to call Buddy at MITRE to see how he's doing.
Hey, if you find any insights, let me know.
Well, it's hard to talk to these guys.
I know. I'm on committees with those guys, and it's hard to get.
Well, that makes it even harder.
Yes, it is.
You have to be civil.
Yeah,
it's a lot more fun. Well, and one of the great losses was I'm blanking on his name because he died about 2 years ago. The guy who headed up the OMG, Object Management Group, whole bunch of standards. And
I know who you're talking about. Can't remember the name though.
Who was it? Yeah, just an inveterate networker. And boy, I went to one of their meetings in Reston, end of the subway line. Didn't go out to Dulles. Snowstorm, that was exciting. And there were maybe 15 people in the room. 4 of them I had known through my software work. One of them for over 30 years. And naming is still, what does this word mean in this context? Where's Bruce?
Context is everything, isn't it?
Yeah, and Bruce Gale, wake up here. But anyway, enough of that. I got to finish my pizza. Roger, we'll talk.
I'm making an omelet.
Oh, I'd like one, please.
I'm finishing my pizza. Thank you, guys. Great start, Roger.
All right. So, anybody else have any other topics, thoughts, ideas before we jump in? What else is on your mind? All right, Mark, I have a quick question. Is there a way to configure the default Tinderbox file when you hit, open new? Particularly like some of the system settings, or I couldn't figure out how to, or like have it pre-installed with a stamp, or I know there's a way to do it with a prototype in the reveal folder, but I couldn't figure that out.
Mark Anderson and I have been discussing this, and I would refer you to him. He's actually more current with the way things work as opposed to the way they ought to work. And I think we're going to revamp this. Uh, some of
Okay.
it's just internal debugging, but currently we open a bunch of Tinder boxes when setting the defaults, and there are good reasons to stop doing that.
Mhm.
Uh, but right now, I would use the favorites mechanism. There's a folder of Tinder boxes in the support folder that you can use as stationary.
Got
And
it.
I think that's the best way to do it.
Got it. Okay.
The
And just
second best way, of course, is to have a collection of installers
correct.
from Chuck Wade.
Yeah. So let me just document that as we're talking about it. Notes. Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Just so you know, where I was stumbling on this morning is because I work in Markdown like Jacob. The auto indent attributes, those two in particular, at a system level are set at 12 and 24 pixels, and so when you start typing in Markdown, a new Tinderbox file will automatically do the indent formatting for you, which is doesn't work for my personal workflow. So I always have to go in and reset those to 0. And I would love to be able to not have to remember to do that every time. It's not a big deal, but it's one of those little first world problems that, just if I could eliminate that step, that would be nice. But again, it takes like 2 seconds to address once I remember to do it. Yeah, so that was one idea that I had. So the other thing I was wanting to, if you guys are all interested, I could pop in and show you. It's not as much Tinderbox, but it goes to the idea that Andreas had kicked off for us a few weeks ago on this idea of workflows and pipelines. And I can show you some effort that I would and some steps I developed to uh, add some command line tools to my computer and then generate an inventory of items from images and videos. So would that be of interest to all of you? Yes, no. Okay.
Sure.
I don't need at least one of you to say yes, and otherwise
Yes.
I'll
Yes.
freeze. Okay, there you go. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Now, one other interesting thing that happened that kind of got me going down this path was for the I updated to Microsoft or to Mac OS Tahoe, and I've spent the last month trying to get Microsoft Office working and other software tools because apparently Tahoe has fundamentally changed its permissioning, an underlying permissioning layer, and for whatever reason, I got the joyous experience of running into a very known hard-lined critical bug with Microsoft Office and Tahoe. So I just could not do anything to get the permissioning work so I could actually get Word to and the other Office tools to work. So I eventually on Monday had to reformat my entire hard drive and start over from scratch and started reinstalling every application from scratch, which then led me to this exercise of as I was doing that, I said, let's take the opportunity of what I'm calling my personal operating system bill or my personal system bill of materials, which is essentially what are all of the pieces of software and all of the other things that I use to do my work, and Tinderbox being one of them. And I've started this process of building out and I'll go ahead and share my screen. I can show you some of this, guys. Um, share, and I don't have everything yet installed, so I can't, I'll just have to share portions of my screen today. So I started going down this process of documenting all of the different pieces of software that I use and install, and then mapping how all of these different pieces of software work together. And it's not just software, it's hardware, and it's command line tools, and it's libraries and engines. And I started going through that process and figuring that out. And one of the exercises I'm going to do is I'm going to ultimately be documenting that. And as I was going through that and thinking about what Andres was talking about, I started, thinking about taking some notes along this idea of, what are workflows, what are pipelines, and what are different elements and utilities. And again, I've not been able to have the time. I've been actually spending the time doing my work versus creating the teaching materials on this. So I'm going to kind of do this on the teaching material part of this on the fly with you all as we go through this. One interesting idea, and I don't know if any of you remember in I think it's 1903 or 1906, Bernard Shaw had wrote a play called Superman. And in that play, there's a quote that says, "Those who can do, those who can't do, teach." And that's kind of that origin of that term that has been so pervasive, at least in the world of my environment of, there's this kind of underlying idea that people that are teachers are people that actually can't do, or they defaulted just to teaching and not doing, and it's unclear to me like really what doing is in society. And so ultimately then I kind of tried to reframe that for myself because I found it so emotionally disturbing to those who can do, those who can't do, teach, those who want to make a difference in the world, do both. And I think that's a lot of the times of what we're trying to do here as collectively as a Tinderbox community is constantly trying to do both, be doers and teachers at the same time. So that's a little bit of a preamble. So I started thinking about some of the terminology that I needed to understand this. So there's this idea of a workflow, which Andreas pulled up, and best I could define it as a workflow is a human technical process that decides the how, when, why, and how work steps, pipelines, etc., are oriented, and then. And it's a really important distinction because we move from this idea of workflow, how we go about getting stuff done, to this idea of a pipeline. And a pipeline is a technical sequence of transformations that data goes through. And so much of our work in the Tinderbox environment is a combination of these two concepts. A lot of our Tinderbox utilities and tools, the libraries, the engines that we use are effectively pipelines. And a lot of the things that we develop with action code are pipelines. What we're essentially doing is creating a series of software, aka machine-oriented, deterministic, and repeatable steps to make something happen, to take this piece of data and make it that piece of data, to take this set of notes, transform it through an action code or templates to have it render out in this way. And so what Tinderbox lets us do is a lot of pipelining work if we think about it in that context. But at the end of the day, what we're really trying to do is workflow work. How do we actually get the outcome that we're looking to accomplish and gather? Before I move forward a little bit, the engineers in the room, like Roger, thoughts, comments, on ideas on some of these thoughts, or Jacob? Jacob, you're smiling. Is that your picture, Jacob, or is that you really you? It looks like it's your picture. You're
Oh,
smiling.
that's my photo. Yeah, I'm getting over a cold, so I'm off camera.
Yeah. So what do you think of that kind of setup or preamble on pulling together um, some kind of this thought construct towards making work happen?
Yeah, no, I actually, one of the things you mentioned here is kind of messy by design. I think that, it's funny as an engineer, we really work hard to kind of order our lives and our universe, but I found that kind of messiness often produces well, a couple things, but it helps me learn, right? So in the messiness, and I get frustrated, and then I got to research and that sort of thing. That's really where the learning happens. The gold is in kind of the mess, and I think as an engineer, kind of learning how to deal with that and to develop fortitude is really has really been helpful for me, and I think it's probably helpful for others. Like And this is yeah. So anyway, that's kind of my little riff on that. I like the messy by design. That's brilliant.
Yeah, one thing I was reading an article the other day too on the generational differences, and it's interesting. They say like the current, it's not millennial. What's the current generation? We've got alpha, something like that.
Yeah, that's the new
But
one, alpha.
yeah,
Z
part of
and
it.
Alpha, yeah.
Yeah, so like Gen X, we grew up with messy, and we also we both grew up with messy and structured in that, we had four television stations. The part of the messy was we had to sit there listening to dad's music and we hated it, but we were forced to be exposed to it. And so the Gen Xer kind of environment often was exposed to mess in the context of the things that we didn't like or we did like, but we were forced to try a lot of things just because of the inherent nature of the way the society was structured. And the challenge with today's generations is they are so algorithmically tuned that that the messiness has been programmatically extracted out of their lives, and not just their lives, our lives now. And so part of the challenge is, um, because of the algorithms, we're being increasingly programmatically less exposed to messy or things that we don't like, and therefore we're losing that ability to maintain fortitude. We're losing that ability to get comfortable in the messy. We're losing, and more importantly, we're losing that. What did you call it, Jacob? You said that the gold is in the mess. We're losing the
Yep.
opportunity to find that 1% of gold. So 99% of the time, we're exposed to crap that we absolutely no interest in. Like the article also suggested, for example, in a pre-algorithmic world, you often would get exposed to like commercials for grandma's dentures that had no relevance to you. But what that did was that exposed you to the needs and pains of other people and other types of people, like older people, younger people, differently challenged people in the world. And with algorithms have removed that exposure, so therefore we're kind of losing our ability to find that gold. What are your thoughts? What are all of your thoughts or ideas on that kind of
Well,
challenge?
one observation is, with workflow, what you're really trying to do is reduce variation as much as you possibly can, and ideally eliminate it, but that doesn't really happen. So boil it down to the points where there really isn't. You can There really isn't. You start to enter the realm at certain points in the workflow. You start to enter the portions where there's not some non-determinism, and you have to do other things to deal with that. Does that make sense?
Well, it does, but how does that statement, is that pipelines you're trying to reduce variation, or is it because I think we were just kind of talking a little bit that somewhere in some levels that variation is where the magic happens,
Oh yeah, it is.
or it's often like in the and I think this the other idea that I was thinking today is, and I've got a bunch of really messy notes that I'll show you at where I'm at in the development of my understanding of all of this. Um, but it's kind of like what Bill Schwartz often talks about too, is and what's so common, and I bring him up because he's the one. I shouldn't say the one. One of our one of the bigger, not big, one of the fundamental scientists that often show up to our meetings, and he's often taking lab notes, and there's that old story too of like how was like uh like the glue for post-it notes was invented as a total mistake, but
Yeah.
because the person was taking lab notes, they were able to go back and figure out what what the properties of that glue that they were making, and turn that mistake into actually a multi-billion-dollar business. Um, so I think that this ability to kind of take notes along the way so that you can reconstruct what you were doing, I think is an art that I never certainly learned in school. And I wish I had, because I think it might have saved myself decades of angst.
Mm.
So I think there's a lot of combinations of these ideas of workflow pipeline and all that. Okay, well, let me go ahead and just demonstrate and show you, ultimately what I got. So the goal was, or the goal is, let me move this off screen and provide another file, is to create a spreadsheet, to help me go through it. So basically, what I wanted to do is go through my house at a first pass to figure out categorically all of the types of stuff that I had in the house. And then that way I could then go back and refine and manage and develop the better part of the inventory. So that was my ultimate goal. And so then I woke up one morning and I asked myself, is there a way to do that programmatically? And and leverage all of these software tools and utilities that we've been talking about throughout the days. And it turns out that there actually is. And one of the core pieces of software out there is this concept called YOLO. You only look once. And and there's this concept called computer vision, which is essentially a open source language set of libraries that allow you to detect and classify objects in images. And it's super, super common. And let me pull up a reference now that I think about it as we're talking. Pull up a browser. There's so much that I've learned from this community. It's amazing. Base. So Hugging Faces. Yeah, here we go. Hugging Face. So if we go to the models, computer vision. I gotta find it. So in the Hugging Faces library, you can just find hundreds of here you go. The computer vision models. So what these kind of libraries like depth estimation or image classification or object detection, you have all of these just out there in the world, people writing these software. So much of it's open sourced and freely available that you can download and use to be able to perform different types of work and functions. And part of what I was trying to do is when I was thinking about wanting to go through this process is there are certainly commercial softwares that are out there that will do this for you. When I say this, take images, help you index and all of that. But I didn't want to be uploading videos of my house into some unknown piece of software for privacy purposes. I also didn't want to be spending my hundreds of dollars unnecessarily for this, what I hope to be a one-off project or a short-term project. And so that was the other kind of step that I needed to address on how do I go about pulling these different pieces together. And let me see if I can try it this way. So the first step I took is I went into chat and I said, what was my prompt? Is there a workflow and set of pipelines that I could use to inventory items in my house? Right. So I think this was generally the prompt that I used when I got started, and ChatGPT came back and said yes, there actually is, and it walked through and started giving me a series of step-by-step methods and processes on how to do that. And then it also was trying to help me develop a set of pipelines, Python scripts and other other tools and methods for figuring out how to be this done. So I started the process using chat, and just to kind of help you see this, I then went through, and as I was going through the process, I started documenting different pieces of software that I would need and the scripts that it was helping me generate and all of that. So I want to walk you through, and then this is a markdown table that I've not yet properly formatted that actually shows you the commercial options that are out there for doing this. So there's just, when you're trying to engage in a kind of pseudo learning research project like this, and, as Jacob had pointed out, it gets super, super messy, and the messy is the gold. And you can just see these are some of the kind of the notes that I was taking to remind myself as I'm going through this process, how to make all of this work. Okay, so at the end of the day, what this requires is you have and are using terminal. And as Peter Wasilka was pointing out, my favorite, and Roger Alexander had introduced me to this, is the iTerm terminal is one of the better terminals because it's extensible, it's free, it's easy to use. And Peter pointed out to me the other day, if you go up to View Tool Belt, you can actually turn on this extra kind of set of window panes within using iTerm, and it will actually help you remember your different commands that you've been putting together. So the first thing you want to do is you want to create a directory on your computer, and you can either create that directory using the make command. Is it MK, or I don't remember the make command. Does anybody? What's the make command, Roger, for creating a directory?
MKDir.
MKD?
MKDIR.
MKDR, is that it?
Yeah.
And so if I made like test directory like that, no. What is it? MK?
MKDIR.
Oh,
Make
DIR. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So if I did like make directory and then I hit list, you'll see that it had just created a test directory for me. So you can do everything through the command line if you want, or if you're not comfortable or familiar with that. And I'll just kind of show you here. Yeah, I'll turn this off. You'll see that make command method that we just did just created that test directory for me. Likewise, if I wanted to create a new one here, I could say test directory 2. And if I now go to my command line and I hit list, you'll now see I've got test directory 2. So part of what I've been learning is getting over the fear of the use of command line versus the WYSIWYG UI. At the end of the day, these tools are giving us the same capabilities. It's just the command line can often be a lot faster, and in some ways, the only way to access some of the applications that we want to do. And so the first thing that I needed to do was create my kind of home inventory directory project. So if I go ahead and I can you can use the CD command for changing that directory. And so I'm going to use CD home inventory, and now I can list. And here are all of the files that are in my home inventory directory. And if I go like that, you can say, here are the files in my home inventory directory. Now, the other thing I learned as I'm going through this process is there's a variety of different types of software that you're going to want to have or use. Now, the first kind of software I started with was, we'll pull this over so we've got it, Homebrew. So, and we've talked a lot about this stuff before, but I don't think it hurts just to kind of do a summary or a review, or hopefully you all won't mind me kind of going through this summary review. And let me take some notes for myself here. Command lines. Right. So again, and here's a great example of taking notes while you're taking notes. So just so I remember it in the future. So like make directory. Creates directory. And I don't worry about spelling at this point. Lists items, CD, changes directory. So I'm just going to have this off on the side. So while we're going through this, I'll be able to have this inventory for such. So what Homebrew is it's a package. It's a software open source, freely maintained. You can donate to if you want package directory management software. And essentially what that is It's a piece of software that helps you keep track of all the command line tools that you install onto your computer. There are other tools like out there like Homebrew, but there was a wonderful article I found years ago too. I think it was done at it was either MIT or Harvard, and they did a research study on the inherent bias of babies. And what they found was that if they put two toys in front of a baby, like a 1 year old, the baby would random. That was the name of the study. The random bias, the random choice bias. So a baby would randomly grab a tool, and the research study found that there was a random choice bias, that the baby would never go back to the tool that it originally rejected. And so their interpretation from this research is that even inherently as adults, we have a bias towards the first thing that we picked up and used and got working for us, and will inherently not want to go back to other options. And so, long story short, saying Roger Alexander introduced me to Homebrew like 3 years ago, and I've never bothered to look back at any other potential options because it's just worked for me, and I have a random bias or random preference to just using Homebrew. Roger, you're coming off of mute. You want to say something?
I was going to say, yeah, essentially, I'm the same way. I rarely go out looking for if there's a better package manager, simply because this works.
Yes, and again, but yet I think that occasionally, and this is what Descartes or Rousseau said in his meditations, or no, what was Rousseau's comment? His comment was, but every once in a while you have to go back and reevaluate these biases. In other words, to what Jacob's pointing out, put yourself in messy, because you might find some new gold that you would, that you might not have, that you might have been ignoring.
Yeah, preferences eventually, become impediments.
Say that again.
I said preferences often become impediments over time.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, my another coin on this is my men's group team has been helping me out understand too. We'll often set boundaries to help us for and we'll set boundaries in relationships for self-protection, self-management, self-mediation. But over time, though, your like personal boundaries can then become your barriers, and you need to figure out when is a boundary working for you as a medium for you to be able to successfully thrive in life and society, and when does that boundary become a barrier from you actually being able to grow and explore and become a better human. So that's another thing I've been playing with.
Why are we doing it this way? Because we've
Yeah.
always done it this way.
Right. And occasionally you need to learn to break that. And that's what I got to do this week when I reinstalled my operating system, rather than just doing a straight time machine backup. I've been taking, the whole week of like really consciously saying, why am I installing this piece of software? What am I intending to do with it? Is this something that's going to be really useful for me, or is it just a preference or a behavioral muscle memory? So that's been fun to kind of exercise to go through. So the first step is I installed Homebrew. You can copy this URL, and I won't do it now because I've just installed it. And you paste it into your terminal, and you install Homebrew. And so that installs your environment. The next thing that you want to do is you'll install Python. And the way you can do that is and since you're going to be using Homebrew to manage your packages, where's the Python? All right. You could do that. All right, but no, let me just show you. If you do brew install Python, I can't find it in Python right now. You just can paste that in here, and then that will install the Python on your computer. And so then you've got the Python running. And how do I define Python? What
What is it, you mean?
Yeah.
It's a programming language.
Okay. So
Others
Python.
will call it a scripting language, but it's a programming language.
Okay. So we installed Python so that we can actually run our programs or scripts to make stuff happen on the computer. Then once we've installed Python, I found this. There is a software called OpenCV, which is from a company called Ultralytics. And what OpenCV does is it's that utility, and it's a utility that allows you to let me pop that in here. Why is Ultralytics? Okay, I can't find it. I'll just and I used chat a lot of the times to find some of this too. So then I ran a few other scripts. So Roger, can you help me understand pip again too? I don't get that.
Pip is a program that comes with Python installation, and it's how you install additional packages into your installation.
Okay. All right. So we run this pip thing so the Homebrew lets us install command line tools. You then install Python. You then install pip, as I understand it, based on what Rogers just said. That allows you to install other packages within the Python environment. So, like in this case, I installed the Ultralytics tool, which then, as a process, gave me and so I do pip install Ultralytics. That gives me the opportunity to get my YOLO, that utility that I defined earlier as you only look at once software. And then what I learned too is I could set up and run Ollama, which Peter so gracefully exposed and shared with us last week or 2 weeks ago, which is the ability to run local LLM models on your computer. And so, long story short, the software that I ended up needing to be able to do my project was Homebrew, Python, the OpenCV, and Ollama. The other thing I learned while going through this process was
real quick, before you
go
get away
ahead.
from pip, pip is analogous to what Homebrew is. So pip is pip is the Python as Homebrew is to Mac OS. That helps.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense to me. I don't know if it makes sense to other people. All right, so these are the package or elements that I needed to do, and this whole process took me about 60 minutes, maybe an hour and a half at most, to kind of generally figure out and get the idea. Now, as I was going through that, with the help of ChatGPT, it told me that I needed to create different Python scripts to run. And so the Python scripts that I needed to learn to run were essentially, and it gave me this kind of workflow or excuse me, pipeline order that I would need to run them. So it would say I needed to have an extract frame script, which would basically go through a video and extract a frame for a frame for every second of the video. So I essentially produce images out of the video. Then if I had taken any manual images to merge those images into the frames, then I could then run the YOLO script, which then would detect the images. I can then normalize that inventory and then enrich that inventory. And so let me go through that and again, this is a combination of using ChatGPT and the web and searching to figure out all of these different pieces. Now, what you can do is you can go ahead. It's called Nano, I think. How do I create let me see if I can remember the steps of creating just so people can see doing it through the command line. How do you pop, it's the Nano. How do you pop up the command line editor again? Roger.
What do you mean command line editor?
If I wanted to edit create a file.
Okay, well, you can use Nano and then say the file name.
So let's say, and so since we're in this directory, I'll say nano test.py.
Yeah.
Right. And so if I do that, okay, there you go. So if I do that, that opens that up. And again, I didn't really know how to do any of this. So chat just said, copy and paste this Python script into that. So it would say nano. Let me add that to my command lines.
if you have a text editor like Sublime Text or any of the others
Right.
installed, you can
You can do it
generally
that way too.
start it from the command line, and then I'll pop up the whole application. You can edit there and save. This is one of the things that comes by default because you don't have any other, but it's painful to use for any serious editing.
Yeah, and so let me kind of show you what I ended up doing though. So basically what it did is it told me to like it gave me like this script, and I learned to paste that in there. And then what I realized what I could do is hit Command O to save it, hit return, and then Command X. And so then if I then went into here, you'll see I've got this new test.py file. And if I figured out that if I use BB Edit, I didn't need to use the terminal to be able to manage and interact with that. It's just a text file. And so the thing I've been learning about this process too is that again that syncing between the interaction with the command line, that breaking down the mystery of that interaction between command line and the Finder utility is it's pretty seamless as you go through that process. So all right, so let me close that and I'll delete this because I don't want this file there. And so essentially what I learned through the process is I needed to generate these 4 different command line tools. The first one being extract frames. So if I open that one up in BB Edit, essentially, and I didn't write any of this, I just got it all from chat. And then I played with some of the and I used chat to help, like chat had hard coded the path to the videos and hard coded the paths, and then so it helped me modify and tell me how to modify some of these variables so I could have an infinite number of videos and images in a directory and process them. And I've not bothered to read this code; it just started working. And this reminds me from the movie The Fly. Do you guys all remember the 1986 movie Fly with Jeff Goldblum? Or anybody happen to see it?
Yeah, and I hated that movie.
Yeah, but there was I'll never forget it. It's one of those moments in life where you kind of fall out of the chair. I was sitting in the movie theater watching the movie, and there is a scene where he talks about how when she asks him like, "How did you build your teleporting machine?" And then for those that are listening to this and don't know it, it's the 1986 movie The Fly, and he builds this teleporting machine to teleport stuff from one place to another. And when he gets into it himself, there's a fly inside the teleporter that merges his DNA with the fly, and he becomes the fly. And it's interesting horror movie. But there was a comment he said is like, I don't really know how all of this works. I just know I can go buy a computer and it will do this for me. I know if I contract somebody to get to build that and then I put it together, it'll work for me. And that was like one of the first steps in my personal development where I learned that I didn't necessarily need to know how every line worked in something to be able to get something done. And this is a perfect example of that. I have no idea how any of this works yet. But I got it to work. So I learned to do the extract frames element. I then developed, asked it to develop a script for me that would merge my images. And so here's the workflow. I go around the house and I created some videos. So like here's a video of my office. Went ahead and just created a quick little video of my office. I created a video of the living room. Right. Went around here and there's my daughter reading a book. And by the way, I'm doing rover.com dog watching this week. So I've got 12 dogs at the house today. There's my clients. I then went around and also took some images of different rooms and different activities. And the key thing I learned is I needed to like actually create a folder that would be used as categorically as to this is where that item is in the house. So that first step of the workflow before we get to pipeline was to go create those images, create those videos, and stick them in the appropriate environment. The next step was in the workflow to extract, run the extract frames. So extract frames .py. So if I grab that, and paste it in and run it. Oops, we've got to be in the right directory. Okay, now I'm in the directory. Then I extract. Oops. And then I extract the, oh, and I've got to run the Python. That's why it didn't show up. So then I'll get the other thing I needed to do is this. So if I go here and I hit Shift Command P, that opens up the hidden files on the computer. I was finding that as I was going through it, it would work once and then it didn't work. And then it would work another time and then it wouldn't work another time. And then what chat helped me understand was that Homebrew and Python were like doing some background processes of updating different libraries and utilities. And in order to force it to always use a package of software and not to mess with it to create repeatability, it suggested I create what's called a virtual environment so that the software, all of the Python software that I needed for these activities would be in this virtual environment and not be touched. And so I created a virtual environment, which then said, whenever I want to run this set of scripts, I want to start that environment so that environment is consistently using the same versions of software every single time, so I'm not getting conflicts. Roger, could you possibly, or Jacob, explain that better? Or was that good enough?
Well, there's a couple of reasons why you want to create a virtual environment. And I'm no Python expert, but I think some of the system libraries and stuff are protected. So what this does is it says, hey, when you're downloading or adding packages, do it here and don't muck with any of the system stuff. So it typically helps with those sorts of kind of conflicts. It also lets you use different versions of packages in different projects, right? So if one package needs version 1 of something and one package needs version 2 of the same thing, you can set that up using these virtual environments so that they're not conflicting. That's my
Yeah.
kind of hot take on that.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
yeah, and it kind of, and okay, and so summary, it kind of creates these protected environments for the ecosystem, or if you will, of what you're working on. And that kind of goes back to our discussion that Roger raised earlier. Is this like this need for consistency and standardization and configuration? So the virtual environment lets you control that, create a consistent, standardized configuration that doesn't get messed by any external influences.
Yeah, the operating system depends on Python quite a bit. And as Jacob said, you really don't want to mess with that. And creating a virtual environment does that. In other words, another way of looking at this is it helps minimize variation and conflict.
Yeah. Okay, so I figured that out, and that took me. So it took me about an hour and a half to get this all set up, and then it took me like another hour to like figure out that I needed to create this environment and all of that because I had this inconsistency happening that was driving me bananas. And then until I got the environment set up, that inconsistency went away. So then what I do is I run the Python extract by frames. And so what that's now doing is the Python script, and I can just go ahead and show that to you, and we don't need the hidden files.
Hey, Michael, would you be willing to share all this that you've put together?
Yeah, absolutely. Not a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I have a similar need.
Yeah, so not a problem. So this, so what's going to end up happening is what this Python script does is it's basically going to the videos directory, going to the frames directory, and then extracting the frames. And this is the YOLO Analytics software library / software engine. And based on the knowledge that I've learned from this in the last 72 hours, is kind of the library is a set of software that will do something, and the engine is a sets of software that pulls libraries together to do some things in a row. And essentially, that the magic is now going through the process of this is essentially breaking down. Here it's breaking down each frame of the video into individual 1 second images, and then it's going through. And so all this script is doing is breaking the video into individual frames or individual images. And the result of that is here. Frames. the result of that in the case of like what it did was it created the living room and then broke that video up into individual frames. So that's and again, this is something I learned from Mark Bernstein and Anderson along the way too, is as you're going through this process, if you can, and this works really well for action code too, chunk your code into specific individual actions, like extract frames and have that code only do that. And then build another smaller bit of code and then string those pieces together. So that was step one. The next step one is I went ahead and took a bunch of images of different parts of my room or the house that I wanted. And and again, this was, I could have easily just taken those images and dropped them into the frames directory, but I didn't want to do that because um, of separating my raw material versus the output of the workflow or pipeline process. So the only two raw materials I have are images and videos, and the frames. So essentially, what the merge images is doing is it's basically just taking my images and pushing those into the respective frames directories, so that way the software that is being created could then go do its thing. The next step, once I do that, is I then have the Python script, and this is where the analytics YOLO tool comes into play. I have the Python script go through, and so what it's now going to go is look at all of the images in each of the different aspects of the house and produce a raw inventory CSV file, which gets put right here in the output. And so now if I open that
I
up,
suppose you could do this for books, could you?
yeah, you could, and so it basically goes through and says, like in the dining room, I've got a chair, a TV, a dining room table, another chair, a couch, a teddy bear. So there, and I've got all these kind of different, they captured all of these different kinds of stuff. Now that was okay, but then what I wanted to do was to normalize the data, and then basically the normalization was to kind of give me counts. And like I didn't need it to tell me there was 20 books. I just needed to tell me there was a concept of books. And so if I run the normalization, it basically normalized that and gave me a new Tinderbox version of the CSV file, which we now can open up. So and what that did is it said, okay, in the dining room there was one couch, there were 6 chairs, and then it gave me a confidence number on how confident it was on what those items were. I then ran another script, which was called enrich inventory. And this, again, I won't read it line by line because that would make us all roll to the top of the fishbowl. But this is where it got super interesting, is if I go here, I then go and I start a new shell and I run Ollama serve. So basically what I've now has done is I've started the Ollama software. I think I've still got it installed here. Applications. Ollama. Oh yeah, Ollama's, I don't think I have it running. I don't think I have the app installed. I just have the command line version of Ollama. So I ran the Ollama stuff. So I've got Ollama now working in the background. And so now if I go here and I run my enrich script, what's happening now is Ollama is now going, so the local LLM is now going through all of the images and comparing that to what's listed in the spreadsheet. And when it's done, you'll see that it's going to give me an enrichment file, which will then include descriptions and an estimated price for each of the different items that it's found. And let's give it a few seconds to finish that. Where's my inventory down here? takes a little bit because there's a lot. Right. Still working through its process. Okay, so it's done. So now, if I go here, you'll see it's created another file for me called Tinderbox Inventory Enrich. So now if I open that up, you'll see that it's gone down and it's actually added natural language descriptions and a price range, price bands, and value notes. And let's see if I can find, oh yeah, and I love this one right here. It says kitchen person typically found in kitchen, not applicable. Okay, let me find adult. See if this version of it did. Yeah, okay. So here's, you remember you saw my daughter on the couch and it said adult. Which line went? I'm sorry, I lost the line on. Yeah, an adult human present in the living room and intangible person property. So it can, and another version of it, it actually said price is unestimable, can't estimate, or it said priceless, can't estimate it. And another version of the human, it said adult human, 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head. Price unestimable. So then that gave me now an inventory of items. And then all I need to do now is open up oops, not that one. Now all I need to do now is open up a Tinderbox file, drag the CSV file in, and now I've got it imported. And what I can do is change that. So let's see, let's go here. We'll open this up. And what I can do is change this to name item. Let's change that to name. Let's save. And open up the Tinderbox file. Drag that over. And you'll see that I've got a chair and I've got all the attributes that it's gotten. And now I can manually go through and provide a different definition. I can map the image to the one thing I haven't done is I'm going to update the scripts so that it actually adds in the spreadsheet the reference name of the image that item came from. So then I can map that into the image, and then that way when I produce my report of all of the inventory, there's actually be an archive of the actual image that item came from. And so here's an example of and again, once we've done that, I then can use templating and prototypes. I can create a prototype for books and bottles and cups and things like that, and be able to create the output. So that's the work. So long story short, that's a and so where does Tinderbox come into play? I could have skipped all of the automated preamble steps before, just opened up a Tinderbox file and started manually creating notes. But here's an example of using software to automate the note collection efforts to then get that stuff into Tinderbox. Then that now allows me to then start my thinking and then start my refinement and stop from being on a blank page. Yes, Mr. Eddie.
How much of this you mentioned frequent mention of Claude?
No, I didn't use Claude at all. I used ChatGPT to help me write the Python scripts. I used ChatGPT to identify the steps that I would need to make this all happen. And then I just started methodically walking through the steps. Okay,
because of the basic question is how don't want to do this work off device.
Yes, that was my key thing. Is I did not want to use So because of this workflow, there is no commercial company out there that has the images and videos of my house.
Okay.
Everything it's all happening locally on the computer.
Okay. Because obviously there are going to be the security issues of being dependent on ChatGPT, Claude, whatever. Who knows? I mean, don't pay any attention to what they say. It's you're
Yeah.
giving it to them, and they're going to use it.
Exactly. So all the AI did was, and this goes back to the comment that Mark said earlier in the chat today's chat is like he's working on a fiction with his AI assistant. All I used the ChatGPT for was to assist me on what I was supposed to do, what I could do, how the options that would the approaches that I could take to make this happen, aka use third-party commercial software, spend money, breach my privacy to no end, or learn these steps and these computer vision utilities that I can install on my computer for free, have total control over, confine into an environment on my hard drive, and then run all of the processing locally, and then use Tinderbox to make any final nuances or tweaks or that I need for my report.
Sounds good.
Yeah, and so then what I was doing, I would say, hey, chat, this is great, but you hard coded the path to an individual image file. Could you modify the Python so that it would process any video that was in the videos directory or any image that was in the images directory? And it would say, great, here's the updated Python script. I pasted that into the text file, ran it, and it worked. And again, there's a lot of automagical stuff in there that I haven't bothered to learn to read because I need to get the work done and not necessarily learn at this yet every line item of the code. And again, I would say this whole process, maybe from waking up in the morning and deciding I wanted to figure out how to do this to have it fully functioning and having an inventory in my Tinderbox file, 2 hours maybe. Whereas before it could have been taken weeks to never. So that's kind of what I learned throughout this. Anybody else have any other comments, thoughts, reactions, ideas, suggestions on how to improve the workflow or pipeline? Or what you would want to see coming out of something like this? Or did I just lull you all into complacency and bore you to death?
Michael, while you were doing this, I began to play a little bit with taking a photograph of some items and popping it into Gemini to see if I could replicate, because there is no way I'll ever be doing any part of what you've just showed other than maybe installing Homebrew. Um, so anyway, interestingly, I had no trouble at all getting it to recognize and give me a list of the different items. I put a mouse, it identified it as a La Crusade mug.
Yeah.
And it picked up the name of my portable external monitor, um, and gave me a list of that. What it couldn't do is it couldn't give me values yet. But it's kind of interesting, and I fully appreciate that you want this to be a local project. You don't want it going up on the cloud for any reason.
Right.
Uh, with and I know people have mixed feelings, because I'm assured of having a HIPAA compliant environment for any of my work. I'm trusting that. I'm choosing to trust that that's valid. But what's encouraging about it is it never would have occurred to me to do this had I not watched your arduous, painful, and ultimately successful path to get through this.
And in all honesty, it wasn't as arduous or painful as you might think. And to Jacob's point, it got messy, but the messy part was kind of fun. And I think
God, we have different definitions of
yeah,
fun, but go ahead.
well, remember, there's three definitions of fun. There's type one fun, where you're having fun while you're having fun. There's type two fun, where it completely sucks while you do it, but you're having fun after the fact. As like when I did my ultra marathon, my ultra Spartan, it was a 30-mile run with 76 obstacles. It completely sucked while doing it, but it's fun after the fact when you're thinking about it. And then there's type 3 fun where it wasn't fun while you were doing it and it's never fun after the fact.
Yeah, type
And
2
that's
fun, by
fun
the way,
how?
is what they call the justification hypothesis, but
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
you keep thinking that.
Yeah. Sorry, Mark, Mr. Bernstein.
How is that fun?
Well, it's a category of fun. It's like non-fun, anti-fun, maybe. Yeah. But this was type 2 fun. It was painful along the way. But the one thing that really helped me, and again, it wasn't as much the difficulty of going through this process is as it was, and I think the number one hurdle I had, which honestly took me probably a year or two to get over, was being willing to play with this application on my computer, which is the terminal, and learning that the terminal is really no different than the Finder. It's just a different way of launching applications or interacting with files on your computer. Now, the big difference, though, is that you can, like, if you type in the remove command, you can delete stuff that you didn't necessarily want to do. So there is a certain level of, with great power comes great responsibility. There's a ton of command lines that you can run on the computer. And let me see if I can find it. Oh, 64. Mr. Anderson told me about this a long time ago. Yeah, here's a good reference document for Mac OS commands. Like, here's the CD command that changes a directory, and it tells you all of the different commands that you can do. So this is a nice little cheat sheet. So once you kind of go through this and you learn, like PB paste, this is how you copy and paste items on your computer. Once you learn that, you get over that fear factor of I'm gonna destroy my computer, then you can start getting a lot more comfortable and playing with this stuff. And let me show you this. Let me open up one other document as I think through it. Where is it? And I've ad nauseum gone through this stuff before. Tinderbox files. That's the one I'm looking for. I guess I can open up.
While you're looking, Mark Bernstein, I have a question for you. You had put in the chat way back that you were writing a brief historical, I forget what, and starting to use AI and wondering about that. Is that something that is a potential topic for a future meetup? Because it doesn't sound like we'll get to it today.
No, it may be. A core problem of something like writing a story is that the conversations with AIs last for a few hours or a few pages. And then you're talking to a new instantiation, which doesn't know what you've been talking about, which of course is interesting to me. The way to get past it is to take notes. I am interested in a particular note-taking tool and methodology. So that's interesting. But there's also the problem, which I think Michael illustrated quite nicely, that if you just sit back and ask the AI to value all the stuff in your house, you're going to it's not going to end well. But if you ask it how you would make a plan to do this in a sensible way, it will give you a plan. If you don't like that plan, you can ask it again to give you a plan. And eventually you'll get a plan that you say, okay, that makes sense. You take that plan, and then you can have that AI or another AI do simple steps under your supervision. Steps so simple that they will either cannot possibly fail, or if it does fail, you'll know right away. And this way, you go a little bit slower and you work a little bit harder, but you actually get to the end of the road in a couple of hours, which, when you think about it, is amazing.
Yeah, otherwise it would have taken
Yep.
days. I would have been walking around the house and it would have been painful. You know, so that's a great example. The other thing too on that note, okay, so let me finish this. So what, you've all seen me do this before, but this is nothing more than like, taking the PB paste command line through Tinderbox and running, saying, grab my text, throw it onto the clipboard, create a file onto the clipboard, paste that information in the clipboard, and then run my Tinderbox conversion command that converts, basically taking Pandoc and converting this text into a Word document. Right. So what I've been learning over the last 3 or 4 years is to get over the fear. I'll never forget the day that Roger Alexander first showed me command line, and I was freaking out because it was so unfamiliar. I was ready to like be just assured that I was going to destroy all human existence on my computer. And after a while of experimenting and playing, I realized that it wasn't that scary, it wasn't that bad, and it can make it happen. And as we discussed today, the command line is just really creating text files on your computer, much like let me pull this one back up so we can show you, much like these Python scripts. And so all I'm really doing is, when using the command line, it's no different than using a piece of software like Word in the WYSIWYG. It's saying, essentially, run this script that goes to this directory, that looks at that image, that pulls out stuff. And that's all happening locally. And there's, once you get over the fear, you can do it. And one of the ways to get over the fear, by the way, is this. Develop your really good backup strategy. So I use Arc as my, I use Time Machine and I use Arc. So Time Machine backs up my computer all the time on one drive. And then I have Arc that's backing up my computer into an encrypted cloud on another drive. And so I've gotten really comfortable with messing around with all of this stuff because I've learned, in the worst case, like I had to do on Monday, I can go the nuclear option, reformat my entire hard drive, and I've lost nothing. Or I may have lost maybe an hour's worth of work, but because between Time Machine and Arc, my computer is constantly being backed up nearly every minute. And at a worst case scenario, I may lose an hour's worth of work, and it may take me a couple days to rebuild my environment if I have to, like I've done. But there's benefit in that process too. So lots of learnings that I've gone through as going through all of these efforts. The other thing before we leave today, Mark did start off the community with one question. Is one thing I'd like ideas for is the best way to direct new Tinderbox users and prospective Tinderbox users to the forum and the meetups. And possibly, Mark, I would add to that our meetup library of pre-recorded videos. So anybody have any thoughts on that before we close out for today? Let's go into 2026 trying to figure and answer that question. How do we get new users to the resource? And let me say it another way. How do we get new and prospective and existing users to the resources that will help them get the most out of this Tinderbox ecosystem?
Well, one possibility would be to, when they install the software first, for some period of time, every time it starts, pop something up for a few seconds that directs them to that. Or
Good
even on
point.
that open document that comes up, put something there.
Do you have a sense for how often that should happen?
One thing, Mark, is like, I love how iTerms does it. About a day or two into using iTerms, they then pop up a push notification that says, would you like to see a daily tip?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then I give consent and I'm like, yes, I would like to see a daily tip. And so now I get daily tips on using iTerms. So I could see us creating, going back to Dave Rogers' idea and Andreas over the last few weeks, is maybe we work on the side of creating a library of daily tips. I've got stuff, a bunch of like my Tinderbox courses. Maybe I could, write 100 daily tips, and we start with doing that, and that could be something we use to recommend to people. And then there would be an option that would say, don't show this to me again, or I'm done seeing those.
An alternate way, Keyboard Maestro does this. You get these very nice, friendly emails. It's funny. I upgraded and somehow it treated it as a brand new installation and started treating me as a new customer. And it was actually very nice. And, the emails were not so frequently that they were irritating. They were phrased in a way that was, inviting. Um, but also, I was already familiar with the software. The thing that I think about is who is the target audience? Because, no disrespect to Tinderbox, but you don't see a lot of bells and whistles when you fire it up.
By
You
design,
sort of see.
by design, by the way. Yeah.
Well, I understand by design,
Yeah.
but at the same time, will a new user, um, do they know what they're getting into? Do they know, is there a simple project that they could use it for, receive some of what you called, Michael, one of those types of fun. They get some sense of satisfaction from it, and then they begin to move forward. That's, someone has to my thought is someone has to have a reason to use it. It's not like, I mean, there's some kinds of software that you just start using them and then you figure out the uses. I think Tinderbox works best if you have an idea in mind, what you want it to do for you, and then you work your way along. So just thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah, but so what I heard there, Mark, is what you might want to do is when somebody first installs or launches Tinderbox, invite them to sign up for a newsletter or an email, a tips and tricks email list. And again, to Bruce's point, as part of that sign up, you don't want to overwhelm them. So maybe we say we'll send you and what was that markdown guy that you had, Bruce? I really liked his course for the markdown for or regex for Excel. I thought he did a really good job with that stuff. And you essentially create like this weekly
Oh, Ben
email.
Collins.
Yeah, he's got a really nice method. And so there could be like a weekly email that we figure out how to send people that have signed up for it, that directs them to some of these resources. Yeah.
Okay, Michael, you brought it up. You get to do the newsletter.
Well, I'm trying to do that for my school anyway. So we'll figure out how to, but yeah, and this goes back to
Dragoon, one of your students.
Yeah, that goes back to one of the scary edges though of, freely giving away stuff into the community and needing to find a way to actually monetize your time and energy and effort so you can actually survive and eat. So there's that really scary, or balance that one needs to, and a tightrope that one needs to walk to be able to successfully get this stuff done. But well, I'm sure we will figure it out as we go into 2026 when there's a will.
Just teach the dogs how to type.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. All right, we're a little bit over. Happy to continue the dialogue or discussion, but good fun today, guys. You enjoy that? Any other final thoughts before as we finish up our final Tinderbox session for the year?
It's been,
I just want to
especially the
note
fall
that
winter has been really extraordinarily good on these meetups.
I'm sorry, Mark. You guys talked over each other. What was it?
This fall and winter has been extraordinarily good, I think, in these meetups.
Yeah. What do you think? What do you think? What's changed? Like, explain that. Can you quantify or qualify that?
Don't know.
Don't know. Yeah, I agree though. Something changed. It's been fun.
Yep, definitely.
I just wanted to point out Jacob's comment. I don't know if people saw it in chat. I think it's a great idea, about the idea of field guides.
Yeah, no, that's what it is a great idea, and McSparky does that. Field
Yeah.
guide for, and just for those that are listening to this, the amount of work that it takes to produce those is ridiculous. So again, we need to figure out that balance.
Yeah, it's kind of a full-time job.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Happy
There's
New Year,
a
everyone. Have a great
there's
Happy
a
New
new
Year. Stay safe.
so long. There's a new version of the what was considered the best practices document. It's now called the Hitchhiker's Guide to Tinderbox. And it's not going to be necessarily a field guide level of depth, but hopefully for the people who have some familiarity with Tinderbox, it will help them to expand their capability with the app. Not perhaps for the most expert users, but for people who are dipping their toes in, there's some tips and a lot of links to ATB Ref and some to the forum. But if you want to go to the forum and take a look at it, it's up there, open to
Well,
feedback.
that's something you built. You built, Dave.
Yeah, I'd like to, one of these next meetups in the new year, kind of go over an in-depth look at constructing a config folder, config container, all the different types of data that we can stash in there and how it would be used.
I don't see it. Can you drop that
There's a,
link in the
there's a
chat?
link. There is a link in the chat, kind of up about a third, I guess, or a quarter at the 133 mark.
All right, awesome. Okay, well, everybody, thank you for the productive day, and have a great New Year's, and we will see you in 2026.
Hey, everyone.
See you, everybody.
Bye-bye. Happy New Year.
Bye.